Discover the incredible bond, how a kind woman transformed a lucky bear cub's life in 30 days. On a bright morning, Sarah Jenkins laced up her hiking boots and stepped outside, ready to escape the chaos of her daily life. The crisp mountain air invigorated her as she sought solace from her responsibilities as a single mother and veterinary nurse. But today was different. Just beyond the trail's twist, she stumbled upon a sight that changed everything. A tiny bear cub, alone and trembling among fallen leaves. Instinct kicked in. Sarah leaped into action, her heart racing. How could she turn her back on him, knowing the danger he faced? She hurriedly scooped up the fragile creature, naming him Benny, a name that echoed in her mind, striking a chord deep within. The chaos of juggling two spirited children, Hannah and Max, and her demanding job often left Sarah feeling overwhelmed. Each night, with bills stacked high, she lay awake, contemplating how to provide for her family while instilling values of love and integrity. Now, she faced an unpredictability that stirred both excitement and fear. Could she really bring a wild animal into her home? The implications teetered on the edge of madness. As Sarah nurtured Benny back to health, their home transformed into a whirlwind of laughter. Her children adored him, and he brought energy that broke the monotony. Yet, with each passing day, her worries escalated. What if the authorities found out? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Sarah often clashed with her own intentions. She wanted to protect this innocent creature, but she also dreaded the ramifications of harboring a cub, one she had no right to keep. As she fed Benny late at night, she contemplated the moral dilemma weighing heavy on her conscience. In ordinary circumstances, she would let the rules dictate her actions, but Benny felt like family now, his very presence a reminder of her struggles. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With whispers moving through town, Sarah's internal turmoil grew. The community's judgment loomed like a dark cloud. How could she face the local wildlife authorities if they came knocking? The thought of her children's eyes when they found out Benny might be taken away sent her spiraling into despair. Her heart raced at the thought. They loved him so fiercely and believed in the miracle he represented. The paradox lay heavy in her chest. Should she follow the laws of man or protect the life that felt destined to intertwine with theirs? Every moment was filled with dread, thoughts racing like a runaway train. The fear of losing Benny gnawed at her, yet a new emotion unfurled, a fierce determination to keep her newfound family intact. Each day presented a new battle, inching closer to a breaking point. In her desperate pursuit of love and protection, would she risk it all? Would she find the courage to confront the authorities, knowing the fate of her beloved Benny hung in the balance? The clock ticked, and every heartbeat echoed the intense uncertainty, leaving Sarah hanging in desperation and doubt, unable to foresee the outcome. Sarah stood in the dim light of the kitchen, Benny curled at her feet, his gentle breathing a comfort amid the brewing storm of her thoughts. As week followed week, she found her life enveloped by a web of conflicting emotions, joy intertwined with anxiety, love shadowed by fear. Her friends whispered behind closed doors, and the local wildlife authorities loomed large in her mind, an ever-present threat that sparked a fire of rebellion within her. Each morning, she watched her children play with Benny, their laughter echoing through the trees outside, a melody she couldn't bear to silence. But guilt mixed with happiness. The sweetness of those moments tasted bittersweet. She felt like a thief, harboring a creature who belonged in the wild, and yet Benny thrived under her care. How could she reconcile this dissonance? She began to search for answers, not only for Benny's sake but for her own moral compass. The clinic where she worked became a sanctuary, not just a place to help animals, but a haven for her restless spirit. Surrounded by familiar faces, she sought wisdom from her colleagues, experienced vets who had their own stories of challenges and triumphs. She found her voice as she opened up about Benny, sharing her fears and doubts. It was during these conversations that her thoughts began to coalesce into a plan, an action that she had been desperately avoiding. Sarah, if you believe in the bond you share with that bear, fight for it. Just remember, don't let fear dictate your actions, her friend and co-worker Juniper advised one afternoon as they cleaned up after a long shift. Something shifted within Sarah, the idea of fighting for Benny, of confronting her fears instead of cowering beneath them, flickered to life. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she replayed Juniper's words, questioning the very foundation upon which her moral courage rested. Benny was wild, yes, but perhaps he also deserved agency, the chance to choose whether he would remain in her world or return to the wild. Wasn't that choice an act of respect? A whisper of hope began to burn brighter within her. Realization swirled and settled in her mind, forming a clear path forward. She needed to prepare, to educate herself about local laws regarding wildlife and contact the authorities on her own terms. Sarah didn't possess all the answers yet, but what she did have was a growing urge to harness her professional background and use it to navigate this precarious situation. The combination of becoming an advocate for Benny, while ferreting out the regulations, felt like the first true decision she had made for herself in a long time. Days turned into restless nights of planning and paperwork, afforded to her by the new resolve brewing inside. The steadfastness she had displayed caring for Benny transformed into meticulous documentation, his health records, veterinary visits, progress reports. It was all part of her quiet rebellion, a way to wield her profession as a protective shield. But the clock was still ticking. She was acutely aware that each moment brought the threat of discovery closer. Now, with her children's love for Benny fueling her passion, would she really have the courage to stand before the authorities and present her case? The very thought sent electric shocks of anxiety through her veins, but determination wove its way through her fear. The next step loomed large and urgent in her mind, a precipice she could either leap from or retreat back in terror. As she steeled herself for the unknown, Sarah knew that she was preparing not just to defend Benny's future, but to redefine her own. The moment she had been waiting for arrived, one that would demand all her courage and resolve. Did she have what it took to face the looming threat, or would the weight of authority crush her hopes? The time had come to face them. The weight of the upcoming meeting pressed heavily on Sarah's chest. Every waking moment was spent replaying the potential outcomes, her mind a tangled mess of dread and hope. She spent hours researching wildlife laws, gaining knowledge that would empower her, yet equally, it sowed seeds of doubt. What if they disagreed with her views? What if her care for Benny was deemed amateurish, counterproductive? Her breath quickened at the thought. As she prepared to face the authorities, Sarah began to notice how this ordeal transformed her into someone more assertive, someone who demanded respect, not just for Benny, but for herself. The night before the meeting, she methodically reviewed her documentation, every health report, every photo of Benny playing with the kids, a testament to the bond they shared. Yet, beneath this preparation lay an inner turmoil. Was she entirely selfless in her fight for Benny? A nagging thought hinted at the balance of her emotions. Was it also about her realization of personal strength? The next morning dawned gray and ominous, as though nature was mirroring her heart's turmoil. She slipped into her favorite navy blazer, the one that clung to her shoulders with a sense of familiarity, reminding her of professional milestones. It offered a sliver of comfort, a cloak she could don even in the face of potential adversity. Arriving at the office of the wildlife authorities, she felt the weight of scrutiny envelop her. The building loomed large, sterile and detached, a stark contrast to the warmth of her home filled with laughter and wild heartbeats. With her breath steady, she approached the receptionist, who eyed her curiously before guiding her to the waiting area. She had rehearsed her argument in her mind 1,000 times, yet as her name was called, her heart sank into her stomach. The room was enclosed with 4 people seated around a long table, their expressions ranging from bemused to skeptical. The head of the panel, a grizzled man with sharp eyes and thinning hair, regarded her with an intensity that made her hands tremble. "Ms. Turner, thank you for coming. Let's hear about this bear." His voice was authoritative, demanding. In that moment, Sarah felt the weight of the world lift slightly. She recalled the countless conversations with Juniper, reminding herself that fear did not define her. As she began, the words flowed with surprising clarity, speaking about Benny, his playful antics, and the happiness he brought to her family felt visceral. The bond she shared with the bear spurred her narrative into a passionate plea. Slowly, the initial skepticism on the faces around the table began to shift. But then, a woman with piercing glasses interjected, her tone critical. "You understand that bears are wild creatures. They don't belong with humans. This isn't just about Benny, Sarah. It's about the safety of your family and the community." This challenge, rather than deflating her, ignited something fierce within Sarah. "I acknowledge the danger," she replied steadily. "But Benny is different. He was abandoned, left to fend for himself. I've given him a home, but nurturing that bond doesn't diminish his wild nature. With my help, he can still have a life worth living, whether within human confines or in the wild." A murmur of discord accompanied her words. She had struck a nerve. Yet the woman's critical glare was unyielding. As the conversation roared on, Sarah realized this was more than a fight for Benny. It was about asserting her value, proving that she had grown beyond doubt and anxiety. For every doubt cast, she pushed back, each response a step further into the woman she was becoming. As she reached the conclusion of her argument, the panel remained silent, absorbing her fervor. The tension in the air thickened, and she felt their eyes scanning for weakness. But just as she sensed victory, the head of the panel leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Your passion is commendable, but we need to consider what's truly best for Benny. You may not have the last say on that." His words hung heavy, sparking a ripple of anxiety deep within her. What lay ahead in their decision? Would her burgeoning confidence withstand whatever verdict they would deliver? The silence in the room pressed heavily against Sarah, like a weight she could scarcely breathe under. She clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. The panel's gaze bore into her, as if probing for weakness, and she wondered if they could see the flicker of doubt lingering behind her eyes. She had spoken from the heart, yet now, as the heavy silence engulfed her, the tangible essence of what could be lost licked at her mind. Benny, a gentle creature cloaked in fur, had become her purpose. The thought of him being taken away sparked a fire within her that she hadn't realized had been simmering. It wasn't just about Benny. It was a reflection of her own journey of self-discovery. Taking a breath, she searched for composure amid the turmoil. "I understand the risks better than anyone else," she asserted, finding her voice anew. "The last thing I would want is to jeopardize anyone's safety, including Benny's. I'm not asking you to just accept my story. I'm asking you to see the truth in it. He has value, a life worth nurturing, and I have the understanding necessary to help him thrive. Please consider him as an individual, not just another statistic in the wild." The panel shifted, a flicker of contemplation emerging on their faces. Sarah could sense a shift, a crack in their skepticism. It emboldened her to press further. Deep down, she felt a renewed determination to advocate not only for Benny, but for herself, transforming the anxious girl who had once fretted alone into a determined fighter. But just as hope ignited within her, the woman with the glasses shot back. Idealism does not change the reality of the situation. Emotional connections don't negate the inherent risks that wild animals pose. Sarah felt a tug at her core, that familiar pang of self-doubt, but she pushed it back. "You're right," she admitted, the clarity of the moment striking her. "But emotions and connections do make us human. They shape our values and dictate our choices. Isn't that worth considering? There are alternatives to what you might believe is best for him." Her pulse quickened as she saw the panel's expressions morph into contemplation. Sarah pressed on, focusing on the existential aspect of caring for wild animals. It wasn't about conflicting ideologies. It was about compassion and understanding the subtleties of coexistence. The head of the panel spoke again, though this time his tone softened. Perhaps you can provide a behavioral assessment once a week? A whirlwind of relief shot through her. Yes, absolutely. I can develop a plan that ensures his safety and provides the oversight you require. I can be involved and adapt to any protocols you deem necessary. With each word, the fragments of her confidence assembled tighter. The boundaries of what she deemed possible for Benny, and for herself, were expanding. As she left the meeting room, her mind raced with new possibilities. She had fought, and for the first time in a long while, she felt she had become a formidable advocate. With Benny's future still uncertain, she was ready for whatever came next, determined to continue forging this path forward. But as she stepped outside, a new weight settled onto her shoulders. She couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that this was far from over. What if they didn't believe her? What if the evidence she had wasn't enough? That night, thoughts swirled in her mind, igniting a hunger for more knowledge and support. In the moonlight, Sarah stared at the clouds drifting lazily across the sky, pulling out her phone to call Juniper. She needed guidance more than ever, not just to preserve Benny's life but to embrace the woman she was becoming. A woman capable of great things, armed with compassion and tenacity. As she dialed, her resolve grew steadier, but an unsettling question echoed back to her. What if everyone couldn't see what she saw? What if her deepest fears were rooted in reality? Was she truly prepared to face the lengths some might go to stand in her way? The feeling of uncertainty settled heavily once again, like a cold hand on her shoulder. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenges ahead, unaware that the fight for Benny was just the beginning. As Sarah settled into the familiar rhythm of her life, there was an unexpected intensity woven through her thoughts. Benny was now more than just a bear cub. He was a mirror reflecting her own vulnerabilities and strengths. Each day, her connection to him deepened, solidifying her resolve. She immersed herself in research, exploring animal behavior, conservation strategies, and the intricate dance between humans and wildlife. However, knowledge alone wasn't her only ally. She needed allies. The decision to reach out to Juniper had echoed with promise, yet Sarah found herself hesitating, contemplating the right questions to ask. What if she didn't articulate her needs properly? What if she exposed too much of her uncertainty? The internal conflict clawed at her, but the potential for growth burned fiercer. When they finally met at a cafe nestled among the busy streets, the comforting aroma of coffee wrapped around Sarah like a warm blanket. Juniper scanned the room, her presence both grounding and intimidating. With an easy smile, she beckoned Sarah over. Once seated, Sarah's anxiety layered with excitement, strange tension coursing between wanting guidance yet fearing judgment. I've been researching animal behavior, but I feel like I need someone who understands the complexities of wildlife management, she began, her voice steady yet laced with eagerness. You're already ahead of many, Juniper replied, tracing the rim of her cup. Knowledge is power, but advocacy requires a different skill set. Are you prepared to challenge assumptions? Sarah swallowed. The weight of that question pressed down tighter than the scrutiny she'd faced during the panel meeting. Yes, but I'm also scared. What if I'm not enough? What if they still refuse? Juniper's gaze centered on Sarah, piercing through her uncertainty. Doubt is part of growth. It propels us to prove ourselves. But you must decide what you stand for. Not just for Benny, but for yourself. That struck her like a chord struck clear. It was a moment of revelation. Her journey wasn't solely about advocating for Benny. It was about owning her power, her right to assert herself in a world filled with competing voices. Let's start by outlining your plan. What do you envision for Benny? Juniper prompted, a confident spark in her eyes. As ideas spilled from Sarah, her fear dissipated. She envisioned structured assessments for Benny's behavior, a way to demonstrate to the panel the unique nuances of his personality. A holistic approach exploding with color, where science met empathy, a blend that could sway the skeptics while fostering understanding. With Juniper's assistance, they developed a framework, outlining critical points to address in their forthcoming presentations. Sarah felt the empowerment grow within her, bolstered by grit and a cloud of determination. The tension in her stomach slowly unraveled, making way for purpose rather than doubt. Before they parted ways, Juniper leaned in, her expression serious yet encouraging. "You're on the cusp of something significant, Sarah. But remember, every strong foundation requires patience and resilience. You will meet pushback, but every hurdle will only strengthen your resolve." That evening, the thrill of the challenge coursed through her veins. She meticulously prepared a visual presentation designed to convey both science and emotion as she sought to bridge the divide between rationality and empathy. The small room became her sanctuary, filled with notes, diagrams, and her frantic scrawl, transforming her burgeoning ideas into tangible strategies. However, the doubts lingered, like shadows clinging stubbornly against a light. Would the panel resonate with her vision? Would they embrace the poignant balance she was trying to illustrate? The day of the presentation loomed closer, and as the sun set low in the sky, casting an orange glow across her workspace, a chilling realization began to settle. Confronting the panel would mean confronting her own fears head-on. As the weight of her mission anchored her heart in place, she could almost visualize the faces of the panel members, some skeptical, others eager. The anxiety brimming within her morphed into determination. They would see Benny through her eyes, or she would ensure they felt the weight of his story. But just as she began to feel her confidence solidify, an email notification pinged on her phone. An unexpected message from her supervisor that hinted at change within the wildlife management structure. Suddenly, a fearsome thought gripped her. What if this shift threatened Benny's entire future? The tension tightened again, propelling her into the unknown as she prepared for a battle that would demand not just her newfound knowledge, but a relentless valor she hadn't fully discovered yet. The morning light crept through Sarah's window, illuminating her scattered notes and the vibrant sketches of Benny that filled the walls. Each drawing locked away the essence of his spirit, a spirit she was determined to protect. Yet as she stared at the disarray, a sense of dread began to settle in the pit of her stomach. The email from her supervisor haunted her thoughts. What did the impending change mean for her mission? For Benny? With resolve, she straightened her back and pushed the doubt aside. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions. Instead, Sarah adhered to the mantra she and Juniper had crafted. Knowledge sparkled in the shards of uncertainty. Rushing through her morning routine, she focused on reinforcing her presentation, rationalizing her emotional breakthroughs into concise talking points. The hours funneling down to her meeting with the panel sparked adrenaline. Each word, each statistic needed to resonate, persuade, and ultimately challenge the biases they might harbor. When she arrived at the conference room, she paused outside the door, inhaling deeply. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and anxiety. She could hear the rustling of papers and the murmured conversations of the panel members. With a final boost of courage, she opened the door, greeted by a sea of familiar faces. Some offered nods of encouragement, others remained neutral. Taking her position at the front, Sarah set up her presentation materials. The first slide depicted Benny, his large, innocent eyes inviting empathy. "Thank you for being here today," she started, forcing the tremor out of her voice. "I'm not just here to advocate for one bear cub. I'm here to challenge how we perceive wildlife management in our communities." She found herself drawing strength from the image of Benny. Each slide led into the next, her passion igniting the room. Statistics intertwined with anecdotes introduced a dynamic relationship between humans and wildlife. The words flowed like a narrative, wrapping the panel members into the heart of her mission. Yet there were moments when she noticed the skepticism lurking in a few eyes. They were not budging. They formed a barrier not easily dismantled. Their questions cut through her presentation in unexpected bursts. What evidence is there? How will this approach work in the face of budget cuts? Each inquiry forced Sarah to reassess. The questions weren't hostile, they were challenges to her commitment. Reflecting on their words, Sarah grasped that she was not just presenting Benny's case. She was drawing a line in the sand for herself. Her previous doubts emerged like ghosts, but she confronted them head-on. "I understand your concerns," she replied, steadying her voice. "But what matters is not just the numbers on paper. It's about the impact we have on every living being, including the ones who cannot speak for themselves. She felt the room shift slightly. The eyes that were once merely judging began to engage, much like how Benny would tilt his head when he didn't understand something. Then, no sooner had Sarah earned their attention, that a voice cut through the growing understanding, a senior panel member whom she feared the most. But if you advocate based on emotional connections, we risk sidelining the scientific basis of our decisions. A pall fell over her. This was the moment she had been bracing for. She realized the pivotal choice before her, to crumble beneath the weight of their tradition, or to elevate her argument. Breathing deeply, she steadied herself, recalling Juniper's words. What if we can blend emotional connection with scientific methodologies, she proposed, eager strength rising within her. By merging the narrative of Benny's story with robust data, we can create a compelling case for responsible management that honors both the heart and the head. She saw it finally, the flicker of interest igniting in the skeptical eyes. Questions shifted, curiosity replaced apprehension. As the meeting progressed, she found herself less concerned about the outcome and more determined to convey the union of emotion and intellect. Even the panel members who initially seemed indifferent began to lean in, contemplating the implications of her advocacy. But just as she felt the tide turning, her phone vibrated violently in her pocket. She dared not look, knowing the urgency indicated something significant. Was it about Benny? A breaking development in the management structure? As the final question from the panel hovered in the air, Sarah faced the new reality. She stood at the threshold of a potential breakthrough, yet the looming threat of immediate change clawed at her thoughts like an unresolved tension. Could her presentation withstand the ripple of incoming decisions? The unsettling notion swelled. She was wrestling two formidable battles, one for Benny's future, the other for her own emergence into the world of advocacy. The moment of truth, she realized, had only just begun. The panel's final inquiry lingered in the air, but Sarah's attention was abruptly drawn to her phone, vibrating like a heartbeat against her thigh. She could delay no longer. With a quick glance at the screen, anxiety knotted her stomach as she recognized the sender's name, her supervisor. The message read simply, "We need to discuss Benny today. Please meet me as soon as possible." The weight of those words bore down heavily, gathering the tension of the day into a single, potent moment. She tucked away the phone, returning to the room filled with eager but skeptical faces. Yet inside her, a storm was brewing. Her mounting anxiety had transformed into a palpable fire, threatening to overwhelm the ambiance of advocacy she had been cultivating. Focus was vital. She shifted her gaze back to the panel, compelled to harness the moment. "Let's delve deeper into how we develop this approach," she began anew, tapping into the fervor that flickered within her. Merger between humanity and nature can drive progressive outcomes for wildlife management. With Benny as a focal point, we can create policies that are not just economically sound, but ethically grounded. She could see the panel members stir with interest, their furrowed brows softening as she continued explaining how integrating both heartfelt narrative and solid empirical research could forge a new path forward. Maybe, just maybe, the stream of consciousness she unleashed was breaking down the barricades she felt moments before. But even as she engaged them, her mind raced with dilemmas. The urgency embedded within her supervisor's message gnawed at her confidence. What would the meeting entail? What did her superior know that she didn't? These questions hovered above her like clouds before a storm, threatening to mar the brighter skies she had just begun to paint. As the question and answer segment unfolded, Sarah fielded inquiries with newfound ease, her passion echoing loudly in the room. Each response was tempered with insights that combined the emotional tapestry woven around Benny with the academic rigor demanded by the panel. With every positive nod from them, she saw the possibility of collaboration emerge. Hope twinkled in the corners of their eyes, yet a nagging voice inside her urged caution. This moment was merely a stepping stone, a fleeting breath in a much larger battle. The looming threat of decisions on her project, and Benny's fate, sank like a stone in her gut. While she maneuvered through the discussion, each compliment from the panel was shadowed by the specter of uncertainty. Then, the panel chair, a stern, discerning woman whom she respected yet feared, leaned forward and asked, "How do you plan to implement this method within our current budget structure? Can you showcase real-world success?" Here it was, the inciting moment that forced Sarah to confront her limits as a newcomer in the field. She felt exposed, doubting whether she could pull off what was being asked as brainstorming melded with reality. Did she have a viable strategy to demonstrate success amidst pre-existing restraints? "I will develop a pilot program based on our research, using Benny's narrative alongside established methodologies, to present an integrated approach," Sarah asserted, feeling a swell of determination rise as she instinctively typed notes into her computer, mapping out her next steps. As she finished, the panel exchanged glances, their skepticism shrinking under the weight of her conviction. Yet uncertainty clouded her trajectory. The path ahead was still fraught with complexities. As the discussion concluded, gratitude for their engagement swirled with the apprehension of what awaited her at the next meeting with her supervisor. She felt the tension in her hands, each touch of the keyboard echoing a commitment to push forth for Benny and herself. Sarah emerged from the conference room, her mind racing not just with what had transpired, but with strange excitement. What policy changes could she advocate for that would make her fight worthwhile? But there was more to face today, an impending turn that could alter everything she had just fought for. The door to her supervisor's office loomed ahead like an uncertain horizon. She stepped forward, questioning whether she would be met with a step toward opportunity or another hurdle in her way. The dial of her resolve turned up. She wasn't just fighting for Benny anymore, but for her own right to be heard in a system anchored in convention. What new obstacles would her supervisor unveil, and were they insurmountable? As she knocked on the door, the answers loomed just out of reach, waiting to confront her unsuspecting aspirations. The door opened slowly, creaking slightly as if reluctant to reveal the tension building within. Sarah stepped inside, her heart pounding. The office was sparsely adorned, save for a large window that let in a wash of late afternoon light, illuminating stacks of reports piled high like a fortress. Her supervisor, Mark, sat behind a cluttered desk, an expression caught between concern and calculation etched on his face. "Close the door, Sarah." His voice was calm, but the weight behind it indicated anything but casual conversation. She obeyed, the click of the door echoing in the small space. It felt significant, final. "Sit down." Mark gestured to the chair across from him, and Sarah lowered herself into it, her palms clammy against her thighs. "I reviewed your presentation materials from the panel," he began, his eyes narrowing as he scanned her notes. "You displayed passion. But do you truly understand the implications of what you're proposing?" Her mind raced. Digging deep for composure, she replied, "I believe integrating Benny's story can invoke the necessary emotional drive to support our initiatives. We can show the community the ethical dimensions of wildlife conservation." He nodded slightly, but disappointment hung in the air like a thick fog. "Yes, but emotion without financial viability is hollow. Our donors want numbers, data backing every narrative you spin. If we fail to secure funding, Benny may never receive the care he needs, nor will this program launch. What's your plan to achieve that?" She felt the pressure tightening around her chest, and her instinct was to deflect. "I was thinking of reaching out to local businesses to express the potential benefits of partnering with us." "Local businesses?" Mark interrupted, the skepticism evident in his tone. "That's weak, Sarah. You must leverage our existing networks, grants, foundations aligned with wildlife conservation. Anything less undermines our credibility." The shift sent her thoughts scrambling. She was in a deep-end conversation about fiscal constraints when all she wanted was to focus on Benny, on the vision she believed could make a difference. Mark's words cut through her resolve, forcing her to confront her limitations and the harsh realities of the funding landscape. "Do I need to guide you through this? I appreciate your creativity, but this isn't an art project. It's a feasibility study," Mark continued, the hint of frustration spilling over. At that instant, fury ignited within her. Why was her enthusiasm viewed as naivete? She took a breath, choosing her words with deliberate care. I understand our resources are limited, but creativity and innovative thinking can fill in the gaps where funding does not. I want to find a blend, a storytelling initiative paired with hard metrics, something that appeals both emotionally and practically. Show me it can work. His challenge hung heavily between them. The reflection of her own ambition, mirrored through his critique, jolted her into clarity. Perhaps she had been too focused on just one angle instead of strategizing a more rounded approach. This could be her chance to evolve, to marry vision with practicality. I'll develop a comprehensive plan, she said, sitting taller, steel in her voice. I'll outline potential funding sources and how we can market Benny's narrative effectively to gain traction and support. I won't just rely on emotional appeal, I'll pair it with actionable data-driven strategies. Mark's expression softened. That's more like it, but you'll need to move quickly. We don't have the luxury of time. Use those ideas or risk losing Benny, and your opportunity to lead this project. As she rose to leave, the tension of the past moments began to untwist. The conversation had spurred a flicker of clarity within her, revealing her potential to not only present ideas, but to think critically on how to implement them. With renewed determination, she made her way back to her desk, determined to show Mark that she could merge creativity with pragmatism. What new strategies would arise as she sifted through the practical aspects of her vision? Her fight for Benny had just turned into a battle against her own self-doubt, and as the branches of her strategy began to form, an unexpected realization sparked. She had the ability to create without losing her essence, but now was the moment to explore the depths of her own competence. Steam rising from her coffee cup, a flurry of thoughts surged through her mind. The urgency thickened. It was no longer just about Benny. It was about her professional identity, her capacity for growth. As she typed briskly into her computer, a new question emerged, gnawing at the edges of her resolve. What would she discover about her own potential as she navigated the undercurrents of this demanding challenge? The rhythm of her fingers on the keyboard created a sense of urgency, echoing her determination to merge creativity with concrete strategy. Each line tapped out was a small rebellion against the self-doubt that Mark's words had tried to instill. As the steam from her coffee rose in delicate spirals, so too did her ideas take flight, crafting a narrative that could resonate financially as much as it did emotionally. Sarah began with a detailed analysis of potential grants available to their cause, printing out shortlist options that highlighted specific wildlife conservation initiatives. With each grant application, there would be an opportunity to weave in Benny's story, a narrative thread that could enchant both strict financial gatekeepers and compassionate donors. The dual approach began to feel more achievable, and it fueled her appetite for knowledge. By the time the afternoon began to bleed into evening, Sarah felt slightly lightheaded from the whirlwind of research and plans unspooling in her mind. However, the topics on her screen demanded her attention relentlessly. She mentally cataloged everything she learned, cataloging potential partners and organizations that had previously supported similar causes. The excitement of harnessing her creativity into actionable goals was intoxicating. Yet, beneath the determined exterior, lurked an unsettling sense of vulnerability. What if her plan didn't impress Mark? Would she be viewed as ambitious, yet fundamentally flawed? The internal conflict roiled within her, but she steeled her focus, pushing back against the ominous whisper of self-doubt. In an effort to sidestep the pitfall of emotional overwhelm, she flipped through her notes on community engagement, drawing inspiration from past projects that had seen success through similar storytelling strategies. They highlighted the necessity of not only drawing in funds, but also invigorating public interest. How could she create a narrative that wasn't just about Benny, but about the potential for change that cherished wildlife could evoke? Around her, colleagues started to file out, their conversations softening to a murmur as they spoke of their own weekend plans. She remained in her fortress of papers and ideas, the quiet hum of the office amplifying her resolve. Suddenly, an idea struck her, one that felt bold and risky. What if she organized a community event that showcased Benny, not just a mere fundraiser? but a vivid blend of educational experiences that included interactive sessions surrounding wildlife conservation. This event could serve as an instrumental beacon to secure funding while also rallying support. But could she pull it off? Deep inside, she questioned whether she possessed the organizational skills necessary to coordinate such an initiative. The doubts flickered, but the excitement of possibility pushed them aside. She could partner with local schools and conservation groups to create educational workshops. They could offer community-wide engagement instead of a solitary event. Perhaps a social media campaign could amplify Benny's story and the disparities wildlife faced. This could become a movement of sorts, a way to blend data and emotion while igniting community interest. As she meticulously crafted her thoughts into a cohesive plan, adrenaline surged through her veins. Each detail mattered. Every funding source, every outreach strategy mattered. In the process of assembling these pieces, she recognized the growing strength in her voice, the articulations of her vision sparkling with clarity. Yet as she signed off on her draft, a disheartening afterthought gripped her once more. What if the community let her down? The fear of rejection clawed at her, whispering warnings born from her hesitation to pit ambition against vulnerability. Would her fledgling plans be strong enough to weather external uncertainties? With relentless determination, she pushed the fear back, reminding herself that vulnerability could coexist with strength. The moment of confronting this fear was near. After all, she had the power to shape this project. She was stepping into an unfamiliar territory of leadership, one that could redefine her professional identity. She lifted her gaze from the screen, looking at Benny's picture taped to the corner of her desk. He was fierce and resilient, a reflection of the tenacity she planned to embrace. The moment had arrived for her to act on her newfound potential. As she prepared to send her proposal to Mark, another thought surfaced, challenging her resolve. How would she respond if the criticisms of her ambitious plan echoed with doubt, heavy enough to shake her confidence? Tension hung in the air as she hesitated over the send button. This was not just about Benny anymore, but about the authenticity of her vision interconnecting with a display of leadership. Would she be able to rise to the challenge? As Sarah pressed the send button, she felt a rush of exhilaration and fear wash over her. She had shared her proposal for the community event, a bold plan that fused her commitment to Benny with her drive for a transformative project. This was no longer merely an attempt to save a bear cub. It was a declaration of her newfound confidence and vision in wildlife conservation. Days rolled by, filled with anticipation as she awaited feedback from Mark. Each time her phone chimed, her heart raced, wondering if the response would affirm her efforts or cast a shadow of doubt over her ambitions. The world beyond was a whirlwind. She juggled the regular chaos of her work and home life, interspersed with fervent discussions with her children about Benny and their hopeful dreams for him. When Mark's response finally arrived, the moment felt monumental. She opened the email to find a few lines praising her initiative, punctuated by a challenge to refine her logistics and bolster her funding strategies. It was a constructive critique, not a dismissal of her efforts. Relief and pride surged through her. This validation marked significant professional growth, proof that her voice mattered. Motivated by Mark's support, Sarah dove deeper into her plans. Collaborating with local schools became a priority. She envisioned workshops where children could learn about wildlife conservation while forging connections with Benny's story. This endeavor was more than just outreach. It was building a legacy for Benny that could shape minds and reinforce the bond between humanity and wildlife. Weeks turned into a flurry of activity. Sarah's kitchen transformed into a planning hub, strewn with sketches and schedules, as she enlisted Juniper's help to facilitate meetings with conservation organizations. Together, they crafted a curriculum that highlighted the educational aspects of wildlife care, painting a vivid picture to accompany Benny's life story. Each discussion became a step toward solidifying her position as a trusted advocate within the community. When the day of the event finally arrived, Sarah stood before a crowd of eager families, faculty, and enthusiastic children at the local park. The sun cast a golden light that felt symbolic, illuminating her journey from uncertainty to empowerment. She felt solid confidence in that moment, the culmination of all her hard work. Benny would remain by her side, with his gentle spirit lending weight to her words. As she introduced the event, showcasing educational booths and interactive wildlife displays, Sarah marveled at the transformation she had undergone. Gone was the woman burdened by guilt and self-doubt. In her place stood a competent leader, grounded in knowledge and passion. Parents and children gathered around her, their excitement palpable. Sarah witnessed firsthand how connection could ignite interest and awareness within her community. The merge of data, storytelling, and shared experiences became a thread that wove through everyone present, creating a palpable energy. At the close of the event, a local wildlife sponsor approached her, impressed by her initiative and commitment. He expressed interest in funding Benny's rehabilitation and future educational endeavors to raise awareness about wildlife preservation. This recognition was validation that her efforts had reached beyond mere advocacy. They sparked community action and interest. Sarah marveled at the impact of this day, not just for Benny but for herself. She had achieved a profound personal growth, overcoming her insecurities and proving her capacity to orchestrate change. The fear that once loomed like a dark cloud had lifted, replaced by a sense of substantial fulfillment and rightful recognition of her abilities. In the weeks that followed, the community rallied behind Benny's cause, driven by Sarah's passion and the visible connection they all felt toward him. She established a regular program that brought wildlife education to schools, earning her newfound respect as a dedicated advocate for wildlife. Standing by Benny one evening as he playfully romped in the yard, Sarah reflected on her journey. She had fully transformed, from a solitary mother burdened with responsibility to an empowered leader who harnessed adversity and doubt to fuel her transformation. This was her new life, one steeped in courage and purpose. Sarah smiled, knowing she had not only conquered her obstacles, but provided a lasting legacy for a bear who brought her world back into focus. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the crisp morning air, brimming with possibilities. She felt gratified knowing that she had achieved something real and lasting, one that extended beyond herself. Benny's new life was blossoming, echoed in her own transformation, a testament to where compassion and determination could lead. Now is the time to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share your thoughts on personal transformations and victories.